The massive temple ship filled the viewing screen like a floating cathedral made of crystal and metal. Captain Jiwoo stood on the bridge of the human vessel, Horizon's edge, watching the alien structure grow larger as they approached. She had commanded 3 deep space missions before this one, but nothing had prepared her for the beauty of the Thelvani holy ship. "It's incredible," whispered Daewon, the linguist standing beside her. He clutched his datapad tightly, his eyes wide with wonder. For 2 years, he had studied every scrap of Thelvani language the humans had intercepted. Now he would finally hear it spoken by native speakers. "Security team ready?" Jiwoo asked, without taking her eyes off the temple ship. "Ready, Captain," Kyung-soo replied from his station. The security officer had been skeptical about this mission from the start. Meeting a species that ruled 47 star systems through religious law seemed dangerous to him. But orders were orders. The docking procedure took nearly an hour. The Thelvani were precise and formal in everything they did. When the airlock finally opened, Jiwoo led her small team into a corridor that seemed carved from living light. The walls glowed with soft blue and purple colors that shifted like oil on water. A group of Thelvani priests waited for them in the corridor. They stood nearly 8 feet tall with crystalline skin that reflected the light in strange patterns. Their faces were angular and beautiful in an alien way. The eldest among them wore robes of deep purple and carried a staff that hummed with energy. "Welcome, travelers from Earth," the elderly priest said in perfect English. His voice sounded like wind chimes. "I am High Priest Velmora. We have waited long for this meeting." Jiwoo bowed slightly, as the diplomatic protocols required. "We are honored by your invitation, High Priest. I am Captain Jiwoo, and this is our chief linguist, Daewon, and our security officer, Kyung-soo." Velmora's eyes, which were completely silver without pupils, seemed to study each of them carefully. "Come, we have prepared the sacred chamber for the greeting ceremony." They walked through corridors that twisted and turned in ways that made no architectural sense. The walls were covered with symbols that looked ancient and worn. Daewon kept stopping to photograph them with his datapad, his fingers trembling with excitement. "These markings," he whispered to Jiwoo. "Some of them look almost familiar, like nothing I've seen in Thelvani transmissions." Jiwoo glanced at the symbols. They did seem strange. Circular patterns with sharp angles cutting through them, lines that connected and disconnected in rhythms that almost looked like music written in stone. An odd feeling crept up her spine, like the sensation of remembering something from a dream. The sacred chamber was enormous. The ceiling stretched so high above them that it disappeared into darkness. Hundreds of Thelvani priests filled the space, all wearing robes of different colors. They stood in perfect circles around a central platform where Velmora led the human delegation. "We will now perform the greeting of eternal friends," Velmora announced. His voice echoed through the chamber. "This ritual has been performed for 50,000 cycles in the divine tongue of our ancestors." The priests began to chant. The sound was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Words in a language that seemed to bypass the ears and speak directly to something deeper. Daewon was recording everything, his face locked in concentration as he tried to understand the linguistic patterns. But Jiwoo wasn't thinking about linguistics. The words the priests chanted seemed to resonate in her chest. She could almost understand them. Not the meaning exactly, but the shape of them, the feeling of them. Her mouth moved silently, forming sounds she didn't remember learning. The ceremony continued for 20 minutes. Then Velmora raised his staff, and the chanting stopped. He turned to Jiwoo and spoke in the strange language. His words flowed like water over stones. Daewon looked panicked. "Captain, I don't have that dialect in my database. I can't translate." He's asking us to agree to peaceful friendship, Jiwoo said quietly. The words came out of her mouth before she could think about them. He wants us to speak our agreement in the tongue of the first ones. Everyone stared at her. Kyung-soo's hand moved unconsciously toward his weapon. Daewon's mouth hung open. Captain, Daewon whispered. How did you... But Jiwoo was already speaking. Words poured from her lips in the same musical, ancient language the priests had used. She didn't know what she was saying, not consciously, but it felt right. It felt like reading words that had always been written in her bones. The sound that came from the priests wasn't a gasp. It was more like a collective intake of breath that sucked all the air from the chamber. High Priest Velmora's silver eyes went wide. His hands, which had been gripping his staff firmly, began to shake. The staff fell from his fingers and clattered on the stone floor. The sound echoed through the absolute silence. Impossible, Velmora whispered in English, his voice breaking. The seed tongue. After 50,000 cycles, after all the searching and praying and hoping, he took a stumbling step backward. You speak the language of the precursors. Jiwoo felt dizzy. I don't understand. I've never heard that language before. I don't know how I... But her words were cut off as, one by one, every Thelvani priest in the chamber dropped to their knees. Hundreds of them, prostrating themselves on the ground, their foreheads touching the stone floor. They began to chant again, but this time the words were different, reverent, worshipful. Kyung-soo moved closer to Jiwoo, his hand now openly on his weapon. Captain, we should get back to the ship. No, Velmora said, rising to his feet with difficulty. His legs shook as if he had aged 1,000 years in a moment. Please, you must understand. For 50,000 cycles we have preserved the faith. We have kept the temples. We have searched the stars for any sign of the precursors, the ones who came before, the ones who seeded life across the galaxy and then vanished. What does this have to do with Captain Jiwoo? Daewon asked, stepping protectively beside his captain. Velmora's eyes filled with something that looked like tears, though they glowed like liquid silver. Our entire civilization exists to wait for the inheritors, those who carry the blood of the precursors, those who can speak the seed tongue. He looked at Jiwoo with an expression of wonder and fear. We have waited 50,000 cycles, and now you stand before us, a human, speaking the words that only the gods should know. Jiwoo's heart pounded in her chest. Around them the priests remained prostrate, still chanting in their own language. The symbols on the walls seemed to glow brighter now, pulsing in rhythm with the chanting. There must be a mistake, she said. I'm just a starship captain. I'm not anyone special. You spoke the seed tongue, Velmora said simply. That makes you the most important being in the galaxy. The archive was deep in the temple ship, far below the grand chambers where tourists and pilgrims were allowed. Velmora led Jiwoo, Daewon, and Kyung-soo through corridors that grew darker and more ancient with each turn. The walls here were not the beautiful glowing crystal of the upper levels. They were rough stone, carved with symbols that made Jiwoo's head ache when she looked at them too long. Few Thelvani have entered this place, Velmora said quietly. His voice sounded tired, as if the events in the sacred chamber had drained all his energy. Our people prefer to keep their faith simple. They do not ask questions about where the precursors went, or why they left us. But I have always asked. It is why I became High Priest. You wanted answers, Jiwoo said. I wanted truth. Velmora stopped before a massive door made of black metal. Symbols covered every inch of its surface. He placed his hand against it and spoke in the ancient language. The door responded to his voice, grinding open slowly. The room beyond took Jiwoo's breath away. It stretched into darkness on all sides, filled with shelves and containers that held objects of every shape and size. Some looked like books, others were crystals that pulsed with inner light. In the center of the room stood a large table made of the same black metal as the door. "This is the Forbidden Archive," Velmora said. "Everything we have collected about the precursors for 50,000 cycles is stored here." Daewon immediately walked to the nearest shelf and began examining the objects there. His hands shook as he picked up what looked like a crystal tablet. Symbols appeared in the air above it when he touched it. "This is incredible," he breathed. "Captain, these are star maps, but they show star positions from millions of years ago." Velmora moved to the central table and touched its surface. A holographic display sprang to life above it, showing what looked like a galaxy map. "The precursors did not evolve in our galaxy," he said. "They came from somewhere else, from beyond the space we know. And they did not just visit our galaxy. They changed it. They seeded it with life." "That's impossible," Kyung-soo said. "Life evolves naturally. It doesn't get planted by ancient aliens." "Does it?" Velmora touched the display again, and it zoomed in to show a solar system, then a planet, then DNA sequences floating in the air. "The precursors left markers in our genes, all of us, Thelvani, humans. Every intelligent species in the galaxy carries fragments of precursor DNA." Jiwoo felt her skin go cold. "Are you saying we're all related?" "In a way, yes, but more than that." Velmora brought up another display, this one showing complex genetic sequences. "The precursors didn't just scatter life randomly, they designed it. They created certain species to fulfill certain purposes. We believe the Thelvani were created to be record keepers. Our long lives and our need for order and ritual, these were gifts from the precursors." "And humans?" Daewon asked. He had stopped examining the artifacts and was now staring at the genetic displays. "I do not know. Until today, we did not even know humans existed." Velmora looked at Jiwoo with those strange silver eyes. "But you spoke the seed tongue. That suggests your purpose was very important to the precursors." Jiwoo pulled out her communicator. "I need to contact Earth. We have an archaeologist who might be able to help." The hologram of Bo-Ra appeared a few minutes later, flickering slightly from the distance the signal had to travel. She was young for an archaeologist, barely 30, but she had made several important discoveries about early human civilization. "Captain Jiwoo," Bo-Ra said, squinting at the display behind Jiwoo. "Where are you? Those artifacts look—" "Bo-Ra, listen carefully," Jiwoo interrupted. "I need you to tell me about the Mars excavations, the ones from last year that got classified." Bo-Ra's expression changed. "How do you know about those?" "Just tell me." Bo-Ra glanced around, as if making sure no one was listening to her end of the transmission. "We found structures under the Martian surface, not recent, not from when we first tried to colonize Mars. These were millions of years old, and they had symbols carved into them that didn't match any human language. Do you have images? I can send them to your ship." Bo-Ra paused. "But Captain, those findings were classified for a reason. They contradicted everything we know about human evolution. The symbols suggested that someone or something had been monitoring Earth for a very long time. Send the images to Daewon's datapad. Now." The images arrived 2 minutes later. Daewon projected them into the air beside Velmora's genetic displays. The symbols from Mars hung there, ancient and mysterious. They were identical to the symbols carved on the walls of the Forbidden Archive. "Dear God," Daewon whispered, "the precursors were on Mars." "They were everywhere," Velmora said. "That is what we have learned from 50,000 cycles of searching. They left traces on thousands of worlds. But they never left the living species they created. Until now." Jiwoo's head began to ache. She reached out to steady herself against the table, and the moment her hand touched it, the world exploded with light. She was no longer in the archive. She stood on a planet under a purple sky. Beings that looked like they were made of pure energy moved around her, building structures that twisted in impossible ways. They were singing, and their song was the language she had spoken in the sacred chamber. Then the vision changed. She saw Earth, but it was different, younger. The continents were in the wrong places, and in Africa, primitive humans huddled around fires while beings of light watched them from the shadows. The beings were planting something, not physically, genetically. They were reaching into the DNA of early humans and changing it, adding something, leaving something behind for the future. Jiwoo gasped and pulled her hand away from the table. She was back in the archive with Daewon and Kyung-soo holding her arms to keep her from falling. "What did you see?" Velmora asked urgently. "The table shows visions to those with precursor blood. What did it show you?" Before Jiwoo could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the temple ship. Kyung-soo's communicator crackled to life with urgent voices. "Captain, this is the Horizon's Edge," came the voice of her first officer. "We're detecting multiple Thelvani ships approaching. They're not responding to hails and their weapons are charging." Velmora's face went pale. "No, the purifiers. They must have learned what happened in the sacred chamber." "Who are the purifiers?" Kyung-soo demanded, his weapon now drawn. "Thelvani, who believed the faith must remain pure, who believed that finding the actual inheritors would destroy the religion we have built." Velmora moved toward the door. "They will try to kill you to preserve their version of truth." The door to the archive exploded inward. Thelvani in black robes poured through, carrying weapons that crackled with energy. They shouted in their own language, words that sounded like prayers and battle cries mixed together. Kyung-soo opened fire, forcing them back. "Captain, we need to go, now!" But Jiwoo wasn't moving. She was staring at the symbols on the walls, and words were forming in her mouth again, the ancient language, the seed tongue. But this time they weren't words of greeting. They were commands. The temple ship responded. Lights that hadn't glowed for thousands of years suddenly blazed to life. The floor vibrated with power, and the Thelvani attackers froze in place, held by some invisible force. Jiwoo's eyes glowed with the same light as the symbols. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that hadn't existed before. "This vessel recognizes the inheritor," she said, though the words came from somewhere deeper than her conscious mind. "Protecting inheritor from hostile action." The attacking Thelvani began to scream. The temple ship's medical bay hummed with activity. Jiwoo lay on a bed designed for Thelvani bodies, so it didn't quite fit her human form. Machines she didn't understand surrounded her, scanning her body with lights that made her skin tingle. In-Soo, the human doctor from the Horizon's Edge, worked alongside Thelvani healers, trying to understand what was happening to her. "Her genetic structure is changing," In-Soo said, studying the holographic display of Jiwoo's DNA. "These sequences here, they weren't active 2 days ago. Now they're expressing at levels I've never seen." Daewon stood by Jiwoo's bedside, refusing to leave despite the doctors telling him to rest. "Is she in danger?" "I don't know," In-Soo admitted. "These genes don't match any human genome on record. It's like her DNA is unlocking sections that have been dormant for thousands of generations." Jiwoo felt strange but not sick. It was more like being half asleep and half awake at the same time. She could hear conversations happening around her, but she could also hear something else, a kind of music that came from the walls of the ship itself. The temple ship was singing to her in the seed tongue. Velmora entered the medical bay, looking exhausted. He had spent the last day dealing with the aftermath of the attack. The purifiers who had tried to kill Jiwoo were alive but unconscious. The temple ship's ancient defenses had stopped them without killing them. "How is she?" he asked. "Changing. Insu said simply. I've sent samples back to Earth for analysis, but it will take weeks to get results at this distance. Outside the medical bay, the situation was getting worse. More Thelvani ships had arrived, split between those who believed Jiwoo was the true inheritor and those who thought she was a demon trying to destroy their faith. Arguments had turned into threats. Threats had turned into weapons fire in the space around the temple ship. Kyung-soo appeared in the doorway, his uniform scorched from a firefight. Captain, we need to evacuate you back to the horizon's edge. This situation is falling apart fast. No, Velmora said firmly. If she leaves this ship, the radicals will destroy your vessel. As long as she remains here, they won't dare attack. This ship is too holy. Your people are shooting at each other, Kyung-soo pointed out. How long before someone decides the ship isn't too holy anymore? Jiwoo sat up slowly. Her head felt clear for the first time since touching the table in the Forbidden Archive. The ship wants to take us somewhere. Everyone turned to look at her. What do you mean? Daewon asked. I can hear it. The navigation systems, they've been dormant for thousands of years, but now they're active again. Jiwoo closed her eyes, listening to the song only she could hear. There's a place, coordinates locked into the core systems. The ship wants to go there. Velmora's breath caught. The first temple. The legends speak of it. The world where the precursors first established their presence in our galaxy. But no one has ever found it. Because no one could activate the navigation, Jiwoo said. She stood up, ignoring Insu's protests. The ship has been waiting for someone who could speak the commands, someone with the right genetic key. This is insane, Kyung-soo said. Captain, you can't just fly off to some mysterious coordinates with an alien ship. Earth needs to know about this. We need backup. There's no time. Jiwoo walked to the wall and placed her hand against it. Words flowed from her mouth in the seed tongue. The wall lit up with symbols, forming a star map that showed a route to a region of space no Thelvani or human charts had ever recorded. The purifiers won't stop, Velmora said quietly. And they're not wrong to be afraid. If we find the first temple, if we discover the truth about the precursors, it will change everything. Every religion, every belief system built on their mystery will be shattered. Then maybe it's time for the truth, Jiwoo said. The decision was made. Velmora sent messages to the Thelvani ships, telling them the temple ship was embarking on a holy pilgrimage. Some ships withdrew, satisfied. Others, controlled by the purifiers, remained. They followed as the temple ship's ancient engines powered up and tore a hole through space itself. The journey took 3 days. During that time, Jiwoo spent hours in the navigation chamber, speaking to the ship in the ancient language. Each conversation seemed to unlock more of her dormant genes. Insu watched helplessly as her DNA continued to change. She's becoming something else, he told Daewon privately. Not fully human anymore, but not fully whatever the precursors were either. It's like she's transforming into a bridge between the two. Daewon had barely slept. He spent every free moment researching, trying to understand what was happening. I've been analyzing human history, he said, looking for patterns. Do you know how many times humans have made impossible linguistic jumps? How many languages we've developed that have no clear evolutionary path? What are you saying? I'm saying maybe this was always in us. Maybe humans were designed to be translators, to be the species that could communicate with anyone, understand anything. We've always been better at languages than any other species we've met. We just thought it was natural talent. And if it's not natural, Insu asked, then we were created for a purpose, and Jiwoo is the first human to fully activate that purpose. On the 3rd day, the temple ship dropped out of hyperspace. What waited for them made even Velmora, who had lived 800 years, whisper in shock. A ring world, not a planet, but a massive artificial structure encircling a star. It was so vast that moons orbited sections of it. Cities covered its surface, though they looked abandoned. And at its center, visible even from this distance, stood a tower that stretched up into space itself. "The first temple," Velmora breathed. The purifier ships had followed them through hyperspace. They emerged from the jump with weapons already charging. Their leader, a young warrior priest named Naltek, sent a message to the temple ship. "You have gone too far, old priest. The inheritors are meant to remain legend. If you land on that structure, you will destroy everything our people believe. We cannot allow it." "You would destroy the truth to preserve comfortable lies?" Velmora asked. "I would preserve faith," Nalthek replied. "Open fire." Energy weapons lanced through space, hammering into the temple ship's shields. The Horizon's Edge returned fire, trying to protect the larger vessel. More ships arrived through hyperspace, Thelvani vessels from both factions, drawn by the signals being broadcast from the ring world. In the chaos, Jiwoo walked calmly to the main control chamber. Daewon followed her, afraid of what she might do but unable to leave her side. "The ring world is active," Jiwoo said. Her eyes glowed now, all the time. The change was permanent. "It's been waiting, watching the galaxy for 50,000 cycles, waiting for someone with the genetic key to arrive." "What will it do?" Daewon asked. "It will test us." Jiwoo placed both hands on the control panel. "All of us. Every species that came here today. It will determine if we're worthy to inherit what the precursors left behind." "And if we're not worthy?" Jiwoo's expression was sad and distant. "Then it will seal itself forever, and the galaxy will never know what it was meant to become." She spoke a long phrase in the seed tongue. Her voice carried through the ship's communication systems, broadcasting to every vessel in the space around the ring world. The words were a summons, a challenge, an invitation. The ring world responded. Light exploded from its surface, reaching out to touch every ship present. The weapons fire stopped as pilots lost control of their systems. The light pulled them down, drawing them toward the surface. Nalthek screamed in rage and fear as his ship was pulled along with the others. "What have you done?" Jiwoo's voice came through every speaker on every ship. "I've begun the trial. The precursors left this place to test their children, to see if we've grown wise enough to inherit the galaxy. All of us will be judged together. Thelvani, human, everyone who came seeking answers." "I came to stop you," Nalthek shouted. "Then you will be tested too," Jiwoo said quietly. "The trial accepts all who arrive. It makes no judgment about why they came." The ships descended through the ring world's atmosphere, landing in a massive plaza near the central tower. The surface was made of the same black metal as the door to the Forbidden Archive. Symbols covered everything, glowing with inner light. Jiwoo was the first to step out of the temple ship. She looked up at the tower and heard it calling to her in the language of her blood. Behind her, Daewon emerged, followed by Kyung-soo and Velmora. From the other ships came hundreds of Thelvani, including the warrior priests loyal to Nalthek. They all stared at the impossible city around them. "The trial begins," Jiwoo said, speaking in both English and the seed tongue simultaneously. "Only the worthy may reclaim the inheritance." The medical equipment aboard the Horizon's Edge beeped constantly, tracking changes in Jiwoo's body that In-Soo could barely understand. 3 days had passed since their arrival at the ring world, and the transformation was accelerating. When Jiwoo slept, she dreamed in the seed tongue. When she was awake, she could hear voices speaking from every wall and surface of the ancient structure. "Your genetic markers are now 40% divergent from baseline human," In-Soo said, showing her the latest scans. His voice was carefully neutral, but she could hear the fear underneath. The dormant sequences are fully active now. They're rewriting your cellular structure at a rate that should be impossible. Ji-woo looked at her hands. They looked normal, but she could feel the difference. It was like her whole body was waking up from a long sleep. Am I still human? Genetically? You're becoming something else. Something that was always hidden in the human genome but never expressed. Insu hesitated. But you're still you. Your memories, your personality, your choices, those are all still yours. For now, Ji-woo said quietly. Daewon had spent those 3 days in the temple ship's archives, working alongside Thelvani scholars who had reluctantly agreed to share their knowledge. What he found terrified him. He showed Ji-woo his findings in her quarters that evening. Hae-won, her old friend from the academy and the best pilot on the horizon's edge, sat with them. She had insisted on coming down to the surface after hearing what was happening to Ji-woo. I've been comparing human evolutionary history with Thelvani records, Daewon explained, projecting holographic displays between them. Do you know why humans are so good at languages? Why we can learn any sound, any linguistic pattern, even sounds our vocal cords shouldn't be able to make? Natural selection, Hae-won suggested. That's what we thought. But look at this. He showed them genetic comparisons. Every intelligent species in the galaxy has communication centers in their brains. But humans have something extra, a region that doesn't exist in any other species. It's not just for learning our own languages. It's for learning all languages. The precursors designed us to be translators, Ji-woo said. It wasn't a question. More than that, they designed humans to be bridges between species, to be the universal communicators. Daewon pulled up more data. I've been reviewing suppressed archaeological findings from Earth. There are sites in Africa, Asia, and South America where we've found technology that predates human civilization by hundreds of thousands of years. The discoveries were always classified or explained away as natural formations. But I think they were precursor installations, monitoring stations. Monitoring us? Hae-won asked. Guiding us. Making sure we developed the right way. Making sure the genetic inheritance stayed intact. Daewon looked at Ji-woo with something like awe and sorrow. You're not the first human to express these genes. There have been others throughout history. People who could speak languages they never learned. People who could understand ancient texts that scholars spent decades trying to decode. We just called them savants or prodigies. But why now? Ji-woo asked. Why am I expressing the genes so strongly? Because you came here. Because you made contact with the Ringworld systems. Daewon showed her a scan of her DNA from before they left Earth compared to now. The difference was staggering. The Ringworld is activating your genes. It's preparing you. For what? No one had an answer. Velmora visited her later that night. The old priest looked ancient now, the weight of revelation crushing him. His entire religion was based on waiting for the inheritors. Now that one stood before him, he seemed lost. My people are fighting among themselves, he said, sitting heavily in a chair designed for Thelvani proportions. Half believe you are the fulfillment of prophecy. The other half, led by Nalthek, believe you are a demon. Both sides are wrong. What do you believe? Ji-woo asked. I believe the precursors were not gods. They were beings of incredible power, yes, beings who lived millions of years beyond what we can imagine. But they were not divine. They were just very old and very advanced. Velmora looked at his hands. My entire life has been devoted to a lie. Not a lie, just an incomplete understanding. Is there a difference? The old priest's voice was bitter. I taught billions of Thelvani that their purpose was to wait, to preserve, to never question. And now I find that the precursors wanted something very different from us. What did they want? For us to grow up, to become worthy, to inherit what they left behind. Velmora stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city of impossible architecture. But I don't think we're ready. Humans or Thelvani. None of us are ready for what waits in that tower. Over the following days, Jiwoo felt herself changing in ways beyond the physical. She could understand concepts she'd never studied. When she looked at the precursor technology, she instinctively knew how it worked. The knowledge wasn't coming from outside. It was unlocking from within, written into her genes and waiting for activation. Young Mi, the engineering specialist from Earth, worked with her to map the Ringworld systems. The young engineer was brilliant, but overwhelmed by the scale of what they'd found. "Captain, this structure shouldn't exist," young Mi said as they stood before a wall of flowing data. "The materials science alone is beyond anything we understand. And the power source, I think it's drawing energy directly from the star. Not solar panels or heat collection. It's actually touching the star's core through some kind of dimensional fold." Jiwoo placed her hand on the wall and spoke in the seed tongue. The data flow reorganized itself, becoming clearer. "The precursors didn't just build this," she said. "They grew it. It's partially alive, or it was. Most of it has been dormant for so long that it's forgotten how to live. Can you wake it up? I don't know if I should." The other species ships began arriving on the fourth day. The Ringworld's activation had sent signals across the galaxy, ancient calls that had been waiting for someone to trigger them. Ships appeared from species the humans and Thelvani had never encountered. Some were peaceful, others were aggressive. All of them had received the same message in their genetic memory. "The inheritors have arrived. The trial begins." Nalthek and his warrior priests established a fortified position near their ships, refusing to enter the city, but also refusing to leave. The young warrior watched Jiwoo with hatred and fear whenever they crossed paths. "You are destroying us," he told her during one tense encounter. "Our faith, our purpose, everything we are." "I'm not destroying anything," Jiwoo replied. "I'm just revealing what was always true. Truth can be more dangerous than lies." He wasn't wrong. Already conflicts were breaking out among the Thelvani. Some wanted to embrace the new knowledge. Others wanted to silence it forever. Kyung-soo and his security team worked constantly to prevent violence. On the seventh day, the tower opened. Jiwoo was sleeping when it happened. She dreamed of beings made of light, speaking to her in voices that resonated in her bones. They showed her the history of the galaxy, how the precursors had come from beyond, fleeing something terrible in their own realm, how they had decided to seed this galaxy with life, creating dozens of intelligent species and scattering them across thousands of worlds. But the precursors had known they couldn't stay. Their presence was too powerful. They would prevent the younger species from developing naturally, so they had made a plan. They would leave inheritance protocols hidden in the genetics of certain species. When those species grew advanced enough to find each other, advanced enough to travel the stars, the protocols would activate, and then the worthy would be tested. Jiwoo woke to find herself standing in front of the tower. She had no memory of walking there. Haewon stood beside her, having apparently followed her in her sleep. "Jiwoo, your eyes," Haewon whispered. "They're completely silver now." Jiwoo looked at her reflection in the tower's surface. Her friend was right. Her eyes matched Velmora's now. The transformation was nearly complete. "I have to go inside," she said. "Then I'm coming with you. It might not be safe." Haewon smiled sadly. "When has that ever stopped us?" The tower's entrance opened at Jiwoo's touch. Inside, a spiraling path led upward into light. At the base of the path stood a hologram, a being of pure energy that looked almost human. It spoke in the seed tongue. Jiwoo understood every word. "Welcome, inheritor. The trials await. Bring those you trust. Bring those you doubt. All must be tested. All must prove their worth." "What happens if we fail?" Ji-woo asked. Then the inheritance is sealed forever, and you return to the galaxy unchanged, to face your future without our guidance. And if we succeed? The hologram smiled. Then you will understand what you were always meant to become. The spiral path inside the tower seemed to go on forever. Ji-woo led the way, with Daewon and Haiwan close behind her. Kyung-soo had insisted on coming as well, along with a small security team. Velmora followed, his ancient body struggling with the climb. To everyone's surprise, Nalthek and several of his warrior priests had joined them as well. "I will see this through," the young warrior had said. "If you truly are the inheritor, I will witness it. If you are a demon, I will be there to stop you." The walls of the tower were covered with moving images. They showed the history of the precursors in flowing pictures that bypassed language entirely. Ji-woo watched as civilizations rose and fell. She saw the precursors in their original forms, beings that looked almost human, but taller, with skin that glowed from within. She saw them discover the secret of immortality, then consciousness transfer, then the transformation into pure energy. "They gave up physical form," Daewon whispered, recording everything with his datapad. "They transcended." "But they didn't leave," Ji-woo said. "Not completely. They stayed to watch over the species they created." The images showed the seeding of worlds, precursors visiting primitive planets and altering the genetics of early life forms, not creating life from nothing, but guiding it, pushing it toward intelligence, toward civilization, toward a specific purpose. After what felt like hours, the path opened into a massive chamber. The ceiling was so high it seemed to touch the sky. In the center of the room stood a platform surrounded by pillars of light, and between those pillars stood something that made even Ji-woo gasp. It was a genetic database, the complete DNA sequences of every species the precursors had influenced, billions of life forms, from bacteria to beings that looked like living stars. And at the center, highlighted in gold, were the sequences for humans. Young Mai had followed them up the tower, unable to resist the technical marvel. Now she approached the database with trembling hands. "Captain, this is incredible. The storage capacity alone would require technology we won't develop for centuries. And the organization, every sequence is connected to every other sequence. It's showing us the relationships between species across millions of years of evolution." Ji-woo touched the platform and immediately understood its purpose. It's not just a database, it's a map. It shows which species were designed for which purposes. The holographic displays shifted, reorganizing to show different groupings. Some species were marked as explorers, others as builders, some as warriors, some as philosophers. "What were humans designed for?" Haiwan asked. Ji-woo focused on the human genetic sequence. Information flooded into her mind, written in a language deeper than words. Communication, connection, translation. Humans were designed to be the bridge between all other species, to be the ones who could understand anyone, speak with everyone, forge connections across all barriers. "We were meant to be diplomats," Kyung-soo said skeptically. "More than that. We were meant to be the species that holds others together, the universal translators, the ones who can take knowledge from any source and share it with any recipient." Ji-woo looked at Velmora. "What were the Thelvani designed for?" The old priest approached the platform hesitantly. When he touched it, his silver eyes widened. "Preservation, memory. We are the record keepers. Our long lives, our obsession with ritual and tradition. It was all designed to ensure that knowledge would never be lost. We were meant to remember what others forgot." Nalthek stepped forward aggressively. "This is blasphemy. We were not designed like tools. We are living beings with free will." "Yes," Ji-woo said. "The precursors gave us genetic templates, but they also gave us choice. Look." She manipulated the display to show different paths branching from each species. Every species can develop in different ways. The design is just a starting point. What we become is up to us. Then what is the point of this trial? Naltek demanded. To see if we've learned to work together, Velmora said quietly. The precursors created different species with different strengths. Alone, none of us are complete. But together we can become what they were, Jiwoo finished. Not by transcending our bodies, but by transcending our divisions. The platform suddenly lit up with new displays. Doorways appeared in the walls, each one leading to a different trial chamber. Above each door, symbols indicated which skills would be tested. The trials are beginning, Jiwoo said. We have to split up. Daewon looked at the nearest door. The symbols above it showed representations of communication and translation. That one is yours. And that one? Velmora pointed to a door marked with symbols of preservation and memory. Is mine. More people had entered the chamber now. Representatives from the other species that had arrived at the ring world. Each one approached the doors, drawn to the trials that matched their genetic purposes. Nalthek stared at a door marked with symbols of protection and defense. I am a warrior priest. My purpose is to guard the faith. Your purpose is to protect, Kyung-soo said, standing beside the same door. Human or Thelvani, that's what we were designed to do. To guard what matters. The young warrior looked at the human security officer with something like respect. Then we take the trial together? If you can stand working with a human, I will do what I must. One by one, people entered the trial chambers. Jiwoo went through her door and found herself in a space that seemed to contain every language that had ever existed. Words floated through the air in forms she could see and hear and almost taste. Some were human languages she recognized. Others were alien, belonging to species she'd never met. A voice spoke from everywhere and nowhere. You were designed to understand, to translate, to forge connections. Prove your worth, inheritor. Show that humanity has grown into its purpose. The trial began. Jiwoo had to take words from one language and translate them into another. But the complexity increased with each success. Soon she was translating concepts that didn't exist in the target language, creating new words, building bridges between ideas that had never been connected before. She worked for hours, her mind stretching to encompass linguistic structures that seemed impossible. But each time she thought she would fail, she remembered something Daewon had taught her. Language wasn't just about words. It was about understanding, about empathy, about finding the common ground between different ways of thinking. In another chamber, Velmora faced his own trial. He had to preserve knowledge while also knowing when to let old ideas die. To remember the past without being trapped by it. For a being who had lived 800 years in service to unchanging tradition, it was the hardest thing imaginable. Kyung-soo and Naltek worked together to protect a simulated settlement from waves of threats. At first, they worked separately, each using their own tactics, but the threats grew too complex for one approach. They had to learn to combine their strategies, human adaptability with Thelvani discipline. Daewon's trial tested his ability to find truth hidden in lies, to separate propaganda from reality, to understand history as it actually happened, not as it was recorded. Young Mi had to build structures using principles she didn't understand, to trust in equations she'd never seen before, to create without knowing the outcome. Hours passed. Some people emerged from their trials exhausted but successful. Others came out defeated, collapsing in tears. A few didn't emerge at all. The trials had found them unworthy and sent them back to the entrance of the tower. Jiwoo was the last to finish. When she finally stepped out of her chamber, she found the others waiting. They all looked different somehow, changed, not physically but in their eyes, in the way they stood, They had been tested and transformed. "We passed," Velmora said. "But this was only the first trial." The platform in the center of the chamber lit up with new purpose. A stairway appeared, leading even higher into the tower, and at the top of those stairs, Jiwoo could sense something enormous, something that would change everything. "The final trial," she said. "The one that determines if we're worthy of the full inheritance." "What does it test?" Haewon asked. "Unity. The ability to work together despite our differences, to choose cooperation over domination." Jiwoo looked at Naltek. "Even when we hate each other, even when we're afraid." The young warrior priest's expression was grim. "I still believe you are dangerous, but I have seen that the precursors intended for us to face this together. I will not abandon that purpose, no matter my personal feelings." "That's all I ask," Jiwoo said. They climbed the stairs together, humans and Thelvani, former enemies, species from different worlds with different values and different fears, but all of them chosen by their genetics to fulfill specific purposes. The chamber at the top of the stairs was simple, just a round room with a single pedestal in the center. On that pedestal sat a crystal that pulsed with inner light. "The inheritance core," Jiwoo said, understanding flowing through her transformed mind. "It contains all the knowledge the precursors left behind: technology, philosophy, science, art, everything they learned in millions of years of existence." "And we just take it?" Kyungsoo asked. "No, we have to choose how to share it." Jiwoo approached the pedestal slowly. "If one species takes it for themselves, it will destroy the others. The power imbalance would be too great. But if we choose to share it equally, to distribute the knowledge among all worthy species, then we become what the precursors intended," Velmora finished. "Not a single dominant species, but a community of equals, each contributing their strengths, each supporting the other's weaknesses." Naltek stepped forward. "And if I tried to take it for the Thelvani alone?" "You would fail," Jiwoo said simply. "The crystal only responds to unity, to cooperation. One person has to make the choice, but they have to make it for everyone." Every eye turned to Jiwoo. She was the inheritor, the one whose genes had unlocked the ring world. The choice was hers. She reached for the crystal, and in that moment, she saw two futures. In one, she claimed the inheritance for humanity alone. Earth became the dominant power in the galaxy, ruling over other species through superior technology. Humans achieved everything they'd ever dreamed of, and lost everything that made them human in the process. In the other future, she chose to share. The knowledge spread to all species who had proven worthy. None dominated, all cooperated. The galaxy became what the precursors had always intended, a community of diverse species, each contributing to something greater than themselves. Jiwoo's hand touched the crystal. "I choose all of us," she said.